Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Alaska Weather Show. Today is November 4th, 2020, and I am meteorologist Carrie Haisley. On your screen there are multiple ways that you can get a hold of us if you're seeking weather information. The first is the Alaska Weather Information Line. That number is 1-800-472-0391. You can always find us on the web at weather.gov/Alaska, and feel free to email me anytime with any of your weather questions or any of your weather photos or cool stories. I love to hear from all of you. Carrie.Haisley@noaa.gov is the email address there on your screen. Now, I just got off the phone with one of our forecasters in one of the field offices to talk about the watches, warnings, and advisories that are out right now, and the phrase we came up with was, "It's complicated." Take a look at that map there. We have lots of watches, warnings, and advisories out. All of this due to an area of low pressure that is pushing its way into the western part of mainland Alaska as we go through the overnight hours and into the day tomorrow. So let's see if we can break down some of this as far as the warnings go. Down over the southwestern part of mainland Alaska, most of what you're seeing as far as red there on the map is actually coastal flood warnings. So from Kuskokwim Bay up along towards Hooper Bay, we are looking for some storm surge that could cause some minor inundation, possible erosion. So we've got the warning out for that. As you get further north around the Norton Sound area, these are going to be winter weather warnings. We're looking for significant snow, blowing snow, restrictions to visibility, and very gusty winds to start off the day tomorrow and then linger through the day, and then also some deteriorating conditions with that as it pushes into the eastern interior. And with that, we see some orange watches there for winter weather watches across the lower Yukon Valley, and then also stretching up into the vicinity of Ambler, the No-Attack Valley there. Further north, we also have some concerns about coastal flooding and also some winter weather warnings along the Kotzebue Sound area down towards Shishmaref, and so we are dealing with some products there. And also up along the Arctic coast where we have watches in effect for coastal flooding that go into effect tomorrow. Some other products you see on the map down around the Valdez area, we have a high wind warning that goes into effect this evening and lasts into the day tomorrow, where we are going to look for gusty winds up to about 55 miles per hour, and with that we could see wind chills as cool as -30. And then down over the Panhandle, we have a winter weather advisory. That includes the areas of Cake and Petersburg, and this is a tricky situation because right now it's raining in that area as an area of low pressure pushes its way over the central Panhandle. We do expect that with northerly flow over the Panhandle, that's going to change that rain over to snow. The timing on that is going to be the tricky part, and so how much snow we get is going to be really dependent on when that changeover occurs. So we do encourage you to go to weather.gov/Alaska. And all of the latest watches, warnings, and advisories will be on our website. That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date information. That way you can take a look at the area where you are and actually read the details of all of the products for the area that you are in. So again, very gusty winds in most of these places. Just taking a quick look at some of the text for so many of these watches and warnings. Most places, winds between 50 and 65 miles per hour for our gusts, and looking for snow anywhere from about 4 inches to some places we'll see storm totals, especially the No-Attack Valley, looking for that by Saturday to be as high as 18 inches of snow. So it's complicated. That was the phrase we said when we put this map together. So as far as our satellite picture goes, you do see two areas of low pressure, one pushing its way towards the Panhandle today and spreading with it a widespread rain that we are expecting to change over to snow there in the central Panhandle. And then the other area of low pressure that's going to dominate all the weather, that's triggering all these watches, warnings, and advisories, that one's pushing its way into the Bering Sea now and rapidly pushing towards the west coast. Over the interior, high pressure continues to dominate the weather, so clear skies have been the story. Here's what that looks like at the surface. where we have that area of low pressure now pushing its way out of the Russian Far East. This is a strong system. It's not terribly unusual for this time of year, but it is a very strong system, 958 millibar low. And so with that, we are starting to see some snow showers up along the northwestern part of mainland and seeing quite a bit in the way of rain over the panhandle with that other system. Now into the overnight hours tonight, that area of low pressure continues to march its way eastward. It's a pretty quick mover, and the precipitation associated with that also going to move its way into the western part of mainland Alaska pretty quick as we go through the overnight hours tonight. So we are going to look for ceilings to drop and winds to pick up, and we do see some pretty strong winds. Just to go through some of these here, St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast, you are under that winter storm warning for heavy snow and blowing snow. As far as the snowfall amounts there go, 4 to 6 inches is what we're looking at for you. Seward Peninsula and the Norton Sound area is one of the areas we're most concerned about with this storm. Southwesterly flow, prolonged southwesterly flow with this event. So for them, we're looking for winds up to about 60 miles an hour, at least for our gusts, and about 6 inches of snow in most places, higher over some of the terrain. But we do have that prolonged southwesterly flow. So coastal flooding, particularly in some of the communities along the southern part of the Seward Peninsula, is certainly something we're watching. And then down over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, again, southwesterly onshore flow. Mix of rain and snow, precipitation types a bit trickier there. We are going to see temperatures get above freezing, but there's the other place we're really looking for coastal flooding to be the concern. Overnight, that low over the panhandle starts to weaken and move off. Now for the day on Thursday, that frontal boundary pushes its way into the far western part of mainland Alaska, and it does weaken as it does so, but the precipitation does not go anywhere. And then the southwesterly flow into the coast, that doesn't go anywhere either. So while the storm isn't really that strong, or I guess it's strong, but it's not out of the ordinary strong. For this time of the year, the duration that this storm is going to be impacting the West Coast, that's what's really notable. So for Thursday into the day on Friday, snow pushes its way into a good portion of the western interior, gets into the Brooks Range, the Noatak Valley, the Kotzebue Sound area, and those are the places where we're looking for the most snow when this is all said and done. Significant snowfall for the day on Thursday around the Kotzebue Sound area as well. High pressure over the interior shoves off into Canada. That opens up the door for some showers to work their way into the eastern interior, and conditions do improve for the day on Thursday over the Panhandle. Now for Friday, southwesterly flow means we have onshore flow out along the west coast that just doesn't stop, and so that continues our coastal flooding threat along the Chukchi Sea coast all the way down into Kotzebue Sound, and then around the coast into Kuskokwim Bay, all of that area. So the entire west coast, we're watching for that flooding and that erosion potential. We're also going to look for the gusty winds to continue, the precipitation to continue, and Friday's when we really start to see the snow be the big story up along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and the Noatak Valley. By the time it's all said and done, the area around Ambler, the Noatak Valley, the Brooks Range slopes there, 12 to 18 inches is what we currently have in the forecast. And then we see high pressure try to build its way back in for Friday over a good portion of south central Alaska with some warmer conditions than what we've seen. Hopefully that's welcome news. And then also high pressure trying to get its way back into the Panhandle. Now a quick look at our temperatures to start off the day on Thursday. Temperatures over much of the interior are going to be well below zero, where Fairbanks looks to be the cold spot on the map, bottoming out at minus 20. The story of note here, though, is that as we look out over the west coast, we start to see temperatures warm up quite a bit as that frontal boundary brings with it a good bit of warm air. So while Bethel, you're going to start the day off at around 20 degrees, and then 14 degrees once you get over towards Aniak. The coastal areas are going to be flirting with freezing by the time we get to tomorrow morning. So Hooper Bay down towards Nunivak Island, you could be right around the freezing point. Up on the Arctic coast, we're going to kick off the day with temperatures in the teens to 20s. Temperatures get into the 40s out along the southwestern coast of mainland Alaska, the Bristol Bay area, and the Aleutian Peninsula, or the Aleutian Chain. As we go into the day on Thursday, 40 up around Immonik, and down around Kuskokwim Bay up to about 43 degrees. The interior should get above zero, going to stay well below freezing. Fairbanks up to 7 degrees tomorrow, the south central area into the low to mid 20s. And then up around Fort Yukon, -2 for a high. Temperatures into the teens and 20s on the Arctic coast. Some above freezing temperatures down along the Panhandle for the day on Thursday. Now for the day on Friday, we kick off the day with temperatures also below zero in the interior, but quite a bit warmer than where we've been, so only -2 for Fairbanks.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Let's move on now and take a look at flying weather conditions across the state for your Thursday and your Friday. Thursday, we do start off with widespread IFR to low AFR conditions on the west coast. With that, we do see widespread snow, blowing snow, and low visibility, gusty winds as well. We will look for this to continue to push its way into the western part of the interior as we go through the day on Thursday. Also, Thursday morning, some low conditions along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and also into the Noatak Valley, and then down to the Nulato Hills around the Kotzebue Sound area as well, some lower conditions. Over the southern Panhandle, some IFR conditions to start the day. Those improve to marginal VFR by afternoon. That IFR to low IFR condition that we see out over the western part of mainland just keeps pushing its way inland. By the time we get into the afternoon hours, the areas we're going to be most concerned about are going to be Kotzebue Sound, and then the eastern part of Norton Sound of the Nulato Hills, and then into the western part of the interior through the lower Yukon Valley, the Bristol Bay area, and Kodiak Island. Into the day on Friday, we do see low conditions lingering as we go through the day as that system continues to kind of stay over us and spin its way out. Low AFR conditions along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and the Noatak Valley with some heavy snow. Also some IFR conditions northwest of Fairbanks, including the Tanana area, and then low conditions around the Norton Sound area, the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta into Bristol Bay and the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, and along the Aleutians. Some improvement by Friday afternoon. We are going to continue to see low conditions out west, however, particularly in the northern parts of Kotzebue Sound, the Red Dog Mine area especially, and then also looking for those low conditions to stick around for the day on Friday out over the Norton Sound and Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta areas. For our passes, Anitukvik will be marginal VFR on the south entrance tomorrow, the rest of the pass VFR. Adding in pass VFR for the day on Thursday. Now down to the Alaska Range, we're going to be dealing with deteriorating conditions. So Lake Clark and Merrill are going to start the day at VFR, drop down to IFR by the time we get into the afternoon hours. Rainy starting the day at VFR, dropping down to marginal windy pass VFR and very windy. Over towards Isabel, VFR conditions, same is going to be true for Mentasta VFR conditions. Tanita Pass VFR and then Portage Pass also VFR and very windy for the day on Thursday. Down to the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White VFR, and also a notable wind, significant wind through these passes. For freezing levels, the freezing line is out along the west coast and stretching down into the Bristol Bay area, across the northern Gulf, and then cutting the Panhandle in about half. So a lot of the state now is seeing below freezing conditions. As far as the Bering Sea goes, we see freezing levels drop from about 2,000 feet. In the northern part, actually, they raise up to about 6,000 feet along the Aleutians. For icing, we are going to look for considerable ice for the day on Thursday along that frontal boundary. Other areas we're watching: St. Lawrence Island, Bethel, and then down around towards Dillingham, King Salmon, considerable moderate ice. Also looking for considerable moderate ice along the Seward Peninsula, impacting places like Nome and Gullivan. Also looking for Kotzebue, and then areas just north to be dealing with considerable moderate ice. Same is going to be true for the southern Panhandle, but really anywhere you go tomorrow where there's going to be cloud, there's going to be potential for ice. We have such a wide area of isolated moderate forecast for tomorrow. Now taking a look at our winds, we do see a pretty strong jet pushing its way from southwest to northeast across the Aleutians and into the Bering Sea, pushing its way into mainland Alaska around Nunivak Island. I know that's hard to see under the numbers there. So winds peak out at about 165 knots around Nunivak Island, 135 knots for the jet. And then another jet across mainland Alaska, pushing from the northern part of the state to the southern part of the state, with the strongest winds peaking out at about 125 knots just offshore in the Gulf of Alaska area. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, our strongest winds are going to be along the Aleutians and the southern part of the Bering Sea. We're looking for winds to peak out at about 75 knots and then pushing their way slowly on shore through the day tomorrow. Some very strong winds aloft up to about 60 knots out along the west coast, and that's going to translate into increasing turbulence potential as we go through the day on Thursday. Dropping down now to 3,000 feet, 75 to 80 knots out along the Aleutians. That's the area we're watching for at least turbulence to start off the day on Thursday, but very strong winds at 3,000 feet along much of the west coast of mainland Alaska, 65 knots over the Norton Sound area. So again, we're looking for very strong winds, most of these out of the south to southwest at our flight levels. As far as turbulence goes, widespread considerable moderate turbulence forecast for the day on Thursday. Greatest potential for most of the day is going to be for severe to be along the Aleutians, but we are going to watch the western part of mainland for severe turbulence on Thursday as well.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good, very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
and there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska, more salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure, that makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right. Right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down. And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before. So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about AKwx, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? AKwx, Alaska AKwx, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation, so more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the most recent sea ice analysis from our Alaska Sea Ice program, starting with a look at the ice up over the Arctic, where we do see considerable ice concentration from AKwx over towards the Alaska-Canadian border there in the Beaufort Sea. Less ice over the Chukchi, where we do see quite a bit of open water over the Chukchi itself. Along the coast, we do see some ice growth between Wainwright and Point Lay. Also now looking at some ice growth in the Kotzebue Sound area, particularly around Kotzebue, and then also in the northern parts of Kotzebue Sound, also around Shishmaref, and also starting to see some ice growth now in Norton Bay. Further south, we do see some ice growth in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. Most of that is going to be in Kuskokwim Bay itself, but at least some ice, although we're looking for that to be about 1 inch to 2 inches thick, all along the coast from Ammonik around to Hooper Bay, and then you're not really seeing any ice yet, but along the coast to your east, yes, we do see some ice. Now, as we go through the next couple of days with the active pattern, we'll be watching this ice closely with a southwesterly flow. It's possible that some small bits of ice could get pushed on shore, but we expect most of this ice to be thin enough that we shouldn't see any notable impacts from ice getting pushed on shore. Now, for winds and waves, we take a look quickly at conditions over the Panhandle, where they've had active weather today. Some of the strong winds associated with that system system linger into the day tomorrow, where we see winds gusting between 40 and 45 knots over part of the Panhandle, with some gusty winds and all the winds out in the north. And then our seas ranging between 8 and 10 feet in the interior waters to a bit higher out over the outer waters, up to about 16 feet near Prince of Wales Island. Improving by Friday, although we do continue to see gusty northerly winds over the Panhandle. Over towards south central for the day on Thursday, northerly component again to the winds, up to about 10 knots in the Cook Inlet area over Prince William Sound. Very gusty winds up to about 25 knots. Valdez proper, you're going to look for winds to be even gustier than that. Seas pretty benign though, in the single digits, up to about 8 feet in the northern Gulf. Not much change as we get into the day on Friday. Again, a mostly northerly component to our wind and single digit seas. The real story is out west, so here's a look at marine conditions for the Alaska Peninsula area for the day on Thursday, where we start to see winds out of the southwest up to about 45 knots, just north of Cold Bay there on the Bering side. Also some pretty strong conditions as far as winds and waves go on the Pacific side as well. Into Bristol Bay, winds out of the southwest up to 35 knots, 11-foot seas. And then we see that drop off once we get into the day on Friday, at least some. We keep the southwest to southerly flow, and winds up to about 15 knots in the Bristol Bay area. And then down around Kodiak Island, we look for winds to be between 25 and 30 knots. And down there we do see seas ranging from 15 to 19 feet on the Pacific side. Out the Aleutian chain for the day on Thursday, check it all these bright colors there. The strongest winds and waves are going to be over the central Bering near the central part of the low. So that's going to be the area to watch. But along the Aleutians themselves, looking for winds to be between 30 and 50 knots. Some of our seas getting up to about 25 feet, out towards Shemya 27 feet for the day on Thursday. So certainly some rough conditions out there. Improving for the day on Friday, we do keep a south to southwesterly flow for the day on Friday, but we do see winds stay in the 20 to 25 foot range, with seas still up into the teens. For Thursday out along the west coast, we keep that southwest to southerly wind, 40 to 45 knots, and we do see seas peak out south of St. Matthew Island near the center of that low, up to about 28 to 30 feet. And then closer to land areas, we're going to look for seas to be closer to 20 feet into Norton Sound, into the teens, about 15 feet. So still pretty notable for this time of year with this onshore flow, and certainly going to be notable for the potential for some coastal flooding in some of these areas with this prolonged onshore push and these higher seas. So do check out the coastal flood warnings and advisories that we have out along the coastal areas. Improving for the day on Friday, southerly winds up to about 30 knots and seas dropping down a bit, 12 to 15 feet. And finally up to the Arctic, in the places where we have open water for the day on Thursday, the strongest winds are going to be in the vicinity of Kotzebue Sound, up to about 45 knots with seas to 21 feet. Further north along the coast, winds out of the south up to about 15 to 20 knots. Not much change for Friday. We do see some improvement over the Kotzebue Sound area. Now, just a quick recap, the weather pattern. Very strong low pushing its way into the northern part of the Bering Sea, with a frontal boundary pushing its way towards western mainland Alaska. Another area of low pressure over the Panhandle pushing its way into Canada and weakening tonight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.